Hello, I'm Britt Udison, Executive and Artistic Director at the Loft Literary Center. Welcome to this live stream at Virtual Wordplay. I'm so glad you're here with us. Before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about what brought us here today. For the last year, the Loft staff has been working hard to put together an outdoor book festival that would have gathered 100 authors with 10,000 visitors in our neighborhood in downtown Minneapolis. As COVID-19 hit, we knew we had to think about everything we do differently, especially this festival. While we were disappointed that we wouldn't be able to gather in person, we became even more committed to supporting writers, celebrating new books, and finding new ways to assert the connective power of the written word. In a time of anxiety, we want to offer a powerful event for readers, writers, and booksellers. When we first approached our sponsors, their first question was, what is a virtual festival? And to be honest, we didn't know. Our founding partners, St. Catherine University and Star Tribune, agreed to make a leap of faith with the Loft. With courage, generosity, and vision, they have worked alongside us to figure out what this virtual festival might become. We are grateful to our sponsors and donors. Their generosity is incredible, but it is not enough. We believe it is essential, especially during a health and financial crisis, to offer programs that are free and accessible to all. But that has led to a significant revenue loss. A live event would have included ticket revenue, beer sales, exhibitor fees, and additional sponsorships. The Loft is not closed. We continue to offer classes, fellowships, conversations, support for readers and writers in addition to this festival. We are here to support the literary community, and we ask that you continue to support us. If you are able, please consider making a contribution to the Loft today. Thank you for being here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rick Barrett, and I'm a poet based in Tacoma, Washington. And I'm celebrating my new book of poems, The Galleons, which was recently published by Milkweed Editions. And I want to welcome you to this literary stretch break, which is produced by the Loft and Wordplay, and with very big thanks to the sponsors, St. Catherine University and the Star Tribune. So I'm going to read a couple of poems from the Galleons and hopefully read a couple of new things as well. The muse for the Galleons is or was my grandmother, who died in 2016 at 92 years old. And there are many poems in the book that are elegies for her, including the title sequence of the book, The Galleons. So I would like to read the first section of the title sequence, which is about her. This is called The Galleons 1. Her story is a part of something larger. It is a part of history. No, her story is an illumination of history, the matchstick lit in the black seam of time. Or no, her story is separate from the whole, as distinct as each person is distinct from the stream of people that led to the one and leads past the one. Or her story is surrounded by history, the ambient spaciousness of which she is the momentary foreground, the noticed detail. Maybe history is a net through which just about everything passes, and the pieces of her story are particles caught in the net. Or her story is a contradiction, something ordinary that has no part in history at all, in the way that we understand history and what it includes and what it makes important. History is the galleon in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, in the middle of the 16th century, swaying like a drunk who will take 6 months to finally reach his house. She is on another ship, centuries later, on a journey eastward that will take weeks across the same ocean. The war is over, though her husband is still in his officer's uniform, small but confident among the tall white officers. Her hair is marcelled like a movie star's waves, though she has been too sick with the water's motion to know that anyone sees her. Her daughter is 2 years old, the blur of need at the center of each day's incessant rocking. Here is a ship. Here's an ocean. Here's a figure. Her story a few words in the blue void. So that's the opening poem for the title sequence of the book. The second poem that I would like to read is called The Girl Carrying a Ladder. And I will just mention very quickly that the poem was inspired by seeing a Louis Vuitton ad, which is, I describe a little bit more in the poem itself. The Girl Carrying a Ladder. On the same day, I read about the luxury goods company that has produced a punching bag you can buy for $175,000. I see the photograph of the Palestinian girl who carries a ladder with her each morning when she goes to school. To scale the wall of my own understanding of why a punching bag would cost so much, I have to think about why I'm attracted to that punching bag the way some people are attracted to pink kittens, or the way some people are attracted to camouflage, or the way some people are attracted to their gods. I want that punching bag the way the girl carrying ladder wants to go to school, relentless, single-minded, absurd. Carrying the ladder that is twice or 3 times as tall as she is, leaning the ladder against the wall that separates her from her school. The girl goes up the ladder as though it were something she did every day, which she does. When I think of a punching bag, I think of sex. When I think of a ladder, I think of picking apples. When I think of the girl carrying the ladder to go to school, I think of the neighborhood girls carrying pink camouflage backpacks, not knowing about the armies that the camouflage stands for. The logo of the luxury brand is printed all over the punching bag, the way camouflage is all over us. Camouflage bed sheets, camouflage cell phone covers, camouflage shirts in neon colors that everyone wears, even the people who vote against guns. We live in paradox and we prosper. We live in paradox and we thrive. What I can't figure out is how the girl deals with the barbed wire at the top of the wall she has to go over, or what her ladder weighs, or what she does with the ladder when she gets to school. Does she put it against the wall with the other ladders, the way kids put their bikes in bike racks at school? What I can't figure out is why 2 men who look like gods would want to break down the wall of each other's faces, knowing there is only blood on the other side, or why apples are the fruit children bring to their teachers, and why it isn't coconuts or grapefruit, or why the neighborhood girls, on their way to school each morning, carry backpacks that are so heavy, it looks like they are carrying the world. So those are 2 poems from the Galleons, which I'm very excited about. It came out in February from Milkweed Editions. I wanted to share a couple of new pieces, however, that I've been working on. During the month of March, I got very obsessed with writing prose poems using the Notes app on my phone. They were just these micro prose poems that I was using to basically process the anxiety and fear that I was feeling, that many of us were feeling during the month of March. So I started writing a bunch of little prose poems, and I wanted to read maybe 2 or 3 of those just to share. And each one of these prose poems begins with the phrase, during the pandemic. During the pandemic, I fixed on each fear its own fastidiousness. My mother and the ocean, not even a touch of it, not even her feet in the tender edge of surf. My friend and the tunnels he went through with his eyes closed. When we went outside, we wore latex gloves, the colors of Easter. We stood apart in the mandated distance, like the remaining pieces late in a game of chess. During the pandemic, I couldn't distinguish between solitude and loneliness, between trivia and news, between restraint and prohibition. I went to the barren track of the high school and felt as a mending, walking around in circles. The gulls above looked like scissors. I thought of how we thought of nature as an infinity. This was part of the calamity. During the pandemic, I praised the cherry blossoms. I praised my lungs. I praised crying. I praised, sorry about that. That was my alarm. I praised crying. I praised the faces of my students checkerboarded on the computer screen. I praised the curses I gave to those who deserve them. I praised coffee. I praised ventilators. I praised the people gathered on the rooftops of a nearby building, laughing as they looked at the night sky. So those are just 3 little prose poems from a new project that I've been working on. And so that's the reading portion of what we're doing now. And I'm going to invite Abby to join me because I know that she had some questions that she was going to ask me.
Hey, hi, Rick. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us this morning. What a treat.
Hi, Abby.
All right, so we've got a couple questions from the audience. So first one is from Brianna. She says, I love the poem about Virginia Woolf's walking stick. In this collection, history seems so tied up in things and physical objects. And she says, I see this very strongly in the series of Galleon poems as well. Could you talk a little bit about the meaning of things and objects in your poetry?
Yes. There really, for me, when I look at an object or things, there are really a couple of significances for me. One is just the fact that each thing has this vivid, concrete, tangible sort of beauty just by being in the world. Even things that we might consider as ordinary or ugly. I love thinking about each object having a kind of an aura. Some significance that can be in terms of itself as an object, but also as a metaphor for emotional states that we might have. I love telling my students that if we all went outside and wrote down 5 things that we noticed in the world just by being outside for a few minutes, each person in the classroom would list 5 different things. And I love thinking about that the things that we notice from person to person, they are filtered by or dictated by our subjectivity. So, things have that kind of aura for me. In the book in particular, things took on a slightly different significance in that I started to see how everything was connected to history in some way. That, the history of colonialism, the history of capitalism and consumerism, and how every object has a backstory to it, a context to it that relates it to everything else, particularly problematic histories having to do with colonialism and capitalism. So, the book is a lot about scale in a way. How are small things connected to big, even abstract or hyper object concepts? Because they are all related. And that was part of the work of the book, putting things into juxtaposition so we could maybe consider how something every day is related to something that's much larger.
Great, thank you. All right, another question from the audience. This one is from Savannah. I'm impressed you were able to write about the pandemic in the middle of it. Do you find it easier to write through something, or do you need time to process before you can get something on the page?
That's a great question. I will say that normally I am a person who takes a lot of time to write about something that has happened to me. It might take years. There are poems in the Galleons about experiences that happened 10, 15 years ago. And that's usually the lag time for me. However, we're not in normal times. During the month of March, like many other people, I was stuck at home with my own thoughts. And the thoughts were, like mice in the walls. They were constantly scrambling and scrabbling and making all kinds of little noises. And my response to that was to just write. It was a place of therapy and comfort and safety for me. But I wasn't thinking of it as a very serious kind of writing. It was, like I said, I was using the notes app of my phone. So I hadn't, that to me was like, the place where I put in my grocery list. So it was very low stakes writing, but incredibly emotionally helpful. It was only after I was talking to a friend of mine mentioning that I was working on these little poems that, he suggested that I actually start to take them seriously. And so at that point, it became a writing project rather than just a therapeutic exercise.
Great. Got a couple more here. This one is from Amelia. Are there any books or authors that inspired you to be a writer? And do you remember a moment when you decided that you wanted to be a writer or knew that you could?
That's a really great question. I wonder if writers even, when they self-identify as writers, I wonder if there's actually a long period of time when they're already writers without having been writers. And what I mean by that is that they were probably really intense, committed readers. So from a very early age, I was reading a lot of things that just took me into worlds and thoughts and ideas that I loved inhabiting. It wasn't until college that I actually started to begin to think of myself as a writer. And that was because when I turned 18, I decided to start keeping a journal or a diary. It seemed significant to go to college and start this new phase of my life. So I figured, it seems very mature to keep a diary about what I'm experiencing. And at that point, I realized that I loved writing just passionately. And so that led me into taking creative writing classes that, gave me an education in being a writer. I was also incredibly lucky in that I did my undergraduate degree at Wesleyan University in Connecticut, and my writing teacher there was Annie Dillard, and she was incredibly encouraging. So, come on, y'all. If you have Annie Dillard as your first teacher, you're bound to be a writer.
Amazing. All right, I think we got time for one more. This one is from Monica. What is the most important aspect of your revision process? How is it the same or different when you did the micro prose poems?
It's really about, I talk to my students about inhabiting different parts of the writing process. So there's the first part of the process where you're just in your own creative space, doing interpretive dance in your bedroom by yourself, and you're just writing the poem, letting whatever comes out come out. And then the next day, in the light of day, you put on maybe an editor's hat and look at what you wrote the night before and see what's really there, and start to work on the piece with that editor's hat on, a more evaluative process. And then maybe the third day or a week later, you put on the hat of the stranger who is also an avid reader. What does that person experience when they are looking at this piece of writing, when they know nothing about you or any context for the writing that you did? And so those three parts of the process of my revision, or the last two parts of that process, are my revision process, where I'm evaluating what I've done with a very kind of cold editorial eye, and then evaluating it once again, channeling a stranger who sees it just sort of for what it is, without, and all they're interested in is having an interesting, provocative experience with the writing. So that's what my revision looks like. And, that can happen over, a period of time.
Great. I love the idea of actually assuming all these different roles, and also the interpretive dancing in our room by ourselves. I'm sure many of us are familiar with that right now, whether we want to admit it or not.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rick, for sharing your work and time with us this morning. I can't wait to get my hands on a copy of the Galleons. And those tuning in can too. If you follow our book sales link to the Loft Wordplay bookshop, you can purchase a copy yourself. Thanks again for tuning into the Loft Wordplay Literary Stretch Break. A huge thank you to presenting sponsors St. Catherine University and Star Tribune, because without them, this simply wouldn't be possible. And while all Wordplay events are free, if you'd like to support the Loft programming like this, you can do so by clicking the support button wherever you're watching the stream. So thanks again to Rick Barot. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good day, everyone.